Welcome back to the deep dive. Our mission today is it's focused and frankly it feels a little urgent. We are taking a really close look at a stack of sources that all point to what we can only call a crisis. And that's the accelerating erosion of the university degree's economic value. Now, a lot of our data is anchored in the EU, but the implications for, tuition, careers, and the whole point of higher ed, they're definitely global. Okay, so let's unpack this. I want to start with a story. We've got notes here from a guy named Fritz Coley, a real industry veteran in film and production. So Fritz went to a very reputable film school. He got the degree, but he told us that the piece of paper students are grinding for today just doesn't have the same economic cachet. Not like it did for him 20, maybe 30 years ago. He's very clear that his biggest career wins, they weren't about credentials. They came from deep applied expertise. From mastering complex problems on set, when things go wrong, the credential is just losing its magic.
And that story is so important because it perfectly frames the core problem we found across all our sources. The economic shield that a degree once gave you is measurably failing. And this isn't just a vibe or a perception shift. It's being fueled by a really powerful one-two punch. You've got these huge external pressures like credential inflation and then crucially internal failures from the depersonalization of teaching itself.
So that gives us a really clear path for this deep dive. First, we have to understand that external squeeze the economic reality that is fast turning the degree into an extremely costly prerequisite. And second, we need to dig into the internal structural failures that have devalued the expertise inside the university, which sets the stage for a whole new threat.
So let's start with that external threat. It's a concept called credential inflation. Now, this term, it was defined pretty clearly by sociologists like Collins way back in 2011. He argues it's not about the economy suddenly needing more brilliant people. It's primarily, and this is his phrase, supply-driven. The analogy he uses is like a government just printing more paper money. As the education system expands and just pumps out more degrees, the value of each individual degree goes down, no matter how good it is. And this whole thing is now getting intensified by a looming demographic drop, a shrinking student pipeline that firms like McKinsey were flagging even before the current crunch.
And this is where it gets really interesting because the data doesn't just confirm the inflation, it shows collapse. We've all been conditioned to believe that a university degree buys you this huge, untouchable advantage in the job market, a guaranteed career path. But, look at the Eurostat's data from just this year, 2024. They measured the EU employment rate for recent university grads, aged 20 to 34. It was 82.3%, which sounds high, right?
It sounds good, yeah. But then you compare it. You compare that to the employment rate for people in the exact same age group who did medium vocational training. So not a full university degree. That rate was 80.0%.
Wait, hold on. 2.3 percentage points. That's the entire statistical difference separating a university degree from vocational training across the EU. We're talking 4 years of your life, maybe tens of thousands in debt, all for an advantage that is mathematically tiny. It's barely even a hedge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the sources are very quick to point out that this tiny margin is, quote, almost immediately destroyed by the sheer price and effort required to get that degree in the first place. You're left with a credential that's less like a key to a special room and more like a mandatory ticket just to get in the building.
So what's the real-world consequence of this for you if you're a student? It leads directly to something our sources call bumping down. Because the supply of graduates is now way bigger than the number of truly specialized jobs, employers start demanding degrees for roles that never, ever needed them, just because they can.
Yeah, think about it like this. You have a graduate with a specialized degree, let's say in environmental policy. They're now applying for a generic entry-level job in, I don't know, corporate logistics that's mostly just scheduling and inventory. They're forced to take this job because the specialized market is flooded. So they are effectively bumping down into a lower value role. And they're using almost none of the deep knowledge they paid so much to get. The degree is just a filter. It's a way to shrink the applicant pool.
And that just fuels the whole inflation feedback loop. We saw sociologists Tomlinson and Watermeyer explain that as credentials inflate, their original value drops, which then escalates the pressure on you to get more and better credentials. You suddenly need a master's just to signal what a bachelor's did a generation ago. The university isn't selling a high-value skill set anymore. It's selling a costly prerequisite, a ticket to get in line for a job.
And that external problem, the degree becoming this costly filter, is made so much worse by what's happening inside the institutions. The low market value is, in many ways, a direct result of the devaluation of expertise within the university itself.
Which brings us right into what our sources are calling the administrator trap.
Hmm.
We've seen this model spreading everywhere. It's where the veteran academic, the former professional, the person with real-world experience, the expert, is institutionally reduced to an administrator.
And this didn't just happen randomly. It was driven by a structural shift called massification, this huge move toward much, much larger student bodies, often without any more resources or space. This created a massive system-wide logistical crisis, and the solution universities chose wasn't always hiring more experts. It was about administrative hacks to manage the volume and cut the costs.
And that's the absolute core of the problem. The expert isn't focused on deep mentorship anymore. Their time is just getting eaten up by managing these low-value, high-volume tasks, things like standardizing grading rubrics, processing group project applications, running online assessment tools, or just being in endless group chats.
Right. And Lampert and his colleagues confirmed what this does to the expert's identity. Teachers become these overworked all-rounders. They're forced to be social workers, proxy parents, IT support, managers. When most of your professional time is spent on logistics instead of intellectually challenging your students, you get a very real, perceived loss of expertise. The teachers feel it, and the students definitely feel it.
Can you give us a really concrete example, like a high-value expert task being replaced by a low-value admin one?
Absolutely. So a high-value task would be an expert sitting down one-on-one with a student to define a complex, multi-semester research project, applying niche knowledge to a real-world problem. The low-value administrative task that replaces that is the same expert spending 8 hours just standardizing the language on 20 different assignment rubrics so that a dozen junior adjuncts can efficiently grade hundreds of generic papers. The focus shifts from customizing knowledge to standardizing assessment.
And the most notorious managerial hack for this massification crisis is team-based working, or TBW. Our sources were really clear on this. TBW is almost never implemented for some groundbreaking teaching reason. It's a tool. It's an administrative mechanism to cope with huge student numbers and flat budgets.
It's basically the academic version of hot desking. And the sources actually draw that exact analogy. Just like hot desking depersonalizes the workplace, making you feel disposable, TBW makes the teacher feel like just another asset, one interchangeable part in a delivery pipeline. Hornsby and Osmond saw this trend and raised serious concerns about the dilution of knowledge creation and the quality of knowledge being produced. Why? The whole system is optimizing for logistics, not for intellectual depth.
It's a really vicious cycle. The external market cheapens the degree into a prerequisite, and the internal system responds by cheapening the expert into a manager, which just reinforces the degree's low value.
And this internal failure, it opens the door to an existential threat, especially right now with generative AI. And this is the question we have to ask. If the human teacher's main job becomes organizing information and basic admin, why should anyone pay tens of thousands of dollars for that service?
Exactly, because AI is already a better content administrator. We've seen this shift happen so fast. Ethan Mollick, who studies this stuff, talks about how tools like Gemini and ChatGPT are now incredibly good virtual assistants. They can handle all those routine, low-stakes tasks, scheduling, answering FAQs, summarizing complex texts, even transcription.
So if the university's value proposition is content organization, standardized info, and logistical support, the core functions of the administrator trap, then the university is now in direct competition. It's competing with free or very cheap tools that do those tasks faster, 24/7, and without needing a salary.
And think about the implications for Gen Z students. They're digital natives. They already know that life and business are full of flexible, tech-savvy tools for managing content. They can use AI to research and structure a paper in an instant. Why would they pay a massive premium for a system that is basically a slower, more expensive, less responsive chatbot?
This is where the whole structure starts to crack. If your core product is just the efficient processing of standardized knowledge, a service AI can automate, then the degree becomes an obsolete service. We have to be crystal clear here. The only thing a university can deliver that AI cannot replicate is deep, specialized human expertise. It's applied wisdom and genuine personal mentorship. Without the human expert front and center, the price of tuition becomes completely unjustifiable.
But if the system is driven by massification and budget cuts, how can institutions realistically afford to pivot back to a high-touch master-coach model? I mean, isn't that just romanticizing the past and ignoring the financial reality?
That's the critical point of friction, you're right. But the thing is, they can't afford not to. The alternative is just becoming obsolete. The financial reality is that if the degree is only worth 2.3% more than vocational training, students will just choose the cheaper, faster path. Universities have to pivot from optimizing for volume and low cost to optimizing for unique value that actually justifies that price tag. And that brings us to the only real solution on the table. Given the demographic drop, given the competition from vocational training and now AI, the race to the bottom, chasing enrollment with generic cheat programs, that has to stop. The future has to be in a dramatic re-personalization of the learning experience,
Yeah.
restoring that human connection.
And this means institutions have to actively facilitate that shift. The expert teacher has to transition immediately from being that low-value administrator to the high-value master coach. This is where the price is actually justified. The master coach isn't there to process forms. They're there to actively mentor students through complex, non-routine challenges, drawing on decades of experience.
And this means completely rethinking the core assignments. So instead of generic term papers, the master coach designs what our sources call make a difference, or MADI assignments. These are assignments that ground soft skills like communication, collaboration in incredibly deep, specialized expertise.
Okay, so give me an example. If the administrator assigns a 10-page essay summarizing 3 theories of urban planning, what would a master coach's MAD assignment look like?
The master coach would challenge you to create a complete, actionable, ethically sound proposal to revitalize a specific, struggling neighborhood in your local city. You'd have to engage with 3 real local stakeholders, design a financing model based on actual grant applications. It's an assignment that can't be standardized or automated. It forces you to bring your knowledge, your soft skills, your passion to bear on an unsolved problem. The coaching comes from the expert guiding you through the messy reality of it all.
And what's fascinating there is what the student is really paying for in that model. You're not paying for the content. You can get that from Google or Gemini. You're paying for the master coach's knowledge, their wisdom, the ethical context of the profession, and the network you explore within that personal relationship. People want to be taught by people who have achieved mastery.
Exactly. When you pay for high-level education, you should be paying for the judgment of an expert, not the logistics of an administrator. The human value is undeniable. Learning is a human exchange, not a transaction. The relationship between a mentor and a mentee is deeply personal, and that's where the high value, the really sticky learning happens.
So if we connect this return to the expert mentor to the bigger picture, it offers this kind of triple advantage. First, it future-proofs the degree and makes sure the credential represents competence and wisdom, not just a costly ticket. Second, it actually justifies the price by delivering unique, non-scalable wisdom that AI just can't touch.
And third, and this might be the most important part, it rebuilds authentic trust with students. Students today are savvy. They know when they're being managed for efficiency versus being mentored for mastery. They're craving that genuine connection with an expert who can truly change their professional life. Hashtag you check to Ultra St. Joe.
So the choice for higher education institutions seems pretty stark, pretty clear. They can continue down this path, the deep personalized, TBW-driven administrator model, and just watch their degrees become mathematically marginal and eventually obsolete. Or they can embrace the relational commitment that actually justifies the enormous costs they're asking students to pay.
The economic pressures are real, there's no denying that. But the ultimate non-negotiable value of education has always been that human exchange. It's the exchange between the expert who knows the path and the novice who is seeking it. That is the only defensible product left.
You know, when you look at that powerful quote from Henry Adams, a teacher affects eternity. He can never tell where his influence stops. It just perfectly captures that master coach model. So when you consider paying for a degree today, here's the question. Are you demanding preparation for the job queue, a queue where the data shows you're barely 2.3% better off? Or are you investing in a career that's defined by mastery, integrity, and passion? What kind of personal relational commitment from an expert mentor truly justifies that cost for you?